Welcome, everybody, to Radicalized Truth Survives, where we got your back week after week. This is a investigative show about disinformation, and boy, do we have a great show for you today. I'm here with my friends Jim Stewartson and Fidelity, disinformation investigators, in the trenches with me week after week, really being vital in bringing us the important news under the headlines and the things that we have to deal with while we were continually assaulted in this hybrid warfare state of mind that we're in. So we have Jack Bryan coming up, and we're very excited. He's been on the show before. You know him from his film Active Measures and the work that he does with his producing partner Marley, The Search for Q. And now we're going to be talking about his new podcast, which focuses on Wesley Clark Jr., American PsyOp. And it's incredible. And we're very, very excited. All right, guys, you doing all right? Ready to go?
Let's do it.
Ready to go.
Okay, let's jump into front loading.
Front loaded.
Okay, so I'm calling this segment Reality Interrupted. So I had just filed an investigation for Byline Supplement where I talk about communication breakdowns, intentional throughout the various parts of authoritarian parts of our world. And something was really bugging me because I had looked at former Philippine President Duterte and how he won in 2016. And it smelled a lot like how Trump won in 2016. And sure enough, I found a documentary that mapped it out. And bottom line is that in the Philippines in 2016 was a keyboard army, agent provocateurs, and there's an incredible investigative series by CNA Insider called Internet Trolls, the Unseen Force Behind Philippine Politics. And they talk about this state of unreality that was created. But what they really did so brilliantly in this documentary was they showed the hierarchy, how you have chief architects, often anonymous, who then hire digital influencers who sell these narratives. And underneath that, the lowest tier are the actual paid trolls. And we all on this show can relate to it because what's happening in the Philippines is also part of our war. Why I want to open with this, and I will be unpacking things about this documentary for weeks probably. But one thing is that these paid trolls could earn 7 times more than the average person by telling lies on the internet. They often don't know who the chief architect is who hires them, and they do not tell people what they do. So they're working from home, supporting their family, pushing disinformation. And it was part of what, according to this incredible documentary I'm talking about, Marcus's kid, Bong Bong, who won, had an entire army pushing for him, rewriting history about his father's corruption as if it didn't exist. So yeah,
this is how it works, right? I mean, this is how any insurgency works. This is how, like anonymous operations work. There is a single point of contact, a single rung up the ladder that the actual actors know about. And the only way we're going to unravel all of this is if, I was here, this was the next person up the ladder. And then you get to that person, you're like, what the heck just happened? And they roll, and you actually have to work your way up. We were speaking earlier. This is how insurgency works. This is how ISIS works. This is, we just had a terrorist attack on the power grid here in the United States.
Well, I am blown away at how this undercover team showed all the players. They interviewed a chief architect anonymously, and that person just sounded like they were running a marketing firm. And in the Philippines, there's no law yet against this stuff. So you can cognitively hack the minds of millions and millions of people voting in an election, and that is not yet illegal. Does any of this sound familiar, Jim?
I mean, yeah. It's first of all, the Philippines is an interesting example because a lot of bad shit goes on in the Philippines. I will remind everyone that the guy who ran 8chan,
Yeah.
where Gamergate metastasized into the
Yeah.
alt-right, and where QAnon spread its Q posts, that guy, Jim Watkins, lived in the Philippines for
Yes.
20 years because of those laws.
Oh my God.
Because he could get around, child porn laws, all kinds of he could do all kinds of things there that he couldn't do here. And I don't think that it's a coincidence that a lot of these same tactics that played out over here were auditioned there first and or used there.
That's exactly, I just got a chill because I just remember the whole Philippines connection as it relates to a lot of what we've endured. So that's
there's a
very,
lot.
very important point. So one thing I want to bring up, gentlemen, and I'm sure we'll talk to Jack about this, is in 2016, you'll recall that we had active measures occurring here in America. Well, in 2016, Duterte's election, there were active measures occurring in the Philippines. And he, in this documentary, the reports show, he admits to having paid $200,000 to hire a keyboard army to spread disinformation about him. He doesn't even hide it because it's not yet illegal, right? So why would he hide it? But here's the thing. If they were mobilized to impact an election in 2016, my question is to all of us who do disinformation investigations is what was happening in 2012, 2013, 2014, 2015. So that is something that I know I'm going to be putting a lot of effort into. Much of it I know in my investigations related to Cambridge Analytica, but I think it's really time to go back a decade ago and look at who the players were who had impacts globally, who were technologically savvy to start putting these armies in place, because I'm afraid it may be a lot of the same people that we've been investigating.
I want to make a shameless plug for my Substack and for a podcast I did with Mr. Hi-Fi over here,
Right.
About all the, how we got to this place, starting, way back 20 years ago on Something Awful forums, and how Anonymous formed, and then that metastasized into everything that happened on 4chan. And then in that exact period that you're talking about, 2012 through 15, a lot of things got weaponized. Anonymous got infiltrated and weaponized, unfortunately. WikiLeaks, for example, which people had sort of relied on as this source of, freedom and information, was infiltrated. Gamergate happened and metastasized and was intentionally amplified by Steve Bannon and others, all to prepare the groundwork. Another thing that happened in that period was cryptocurrency metastasized. It started as this sort of little hobby, kind of funny thing that was going on, and suddenly it was being used as the primary currency for white nationalists and propagandists. So,
Incredible.
yes, that period of time could not be more important. And I wanted to, again, just say Hi-Fi has some incredibly important experience, not only in that period, but before.
Well, and then there's the whole like hellscape that I got dragged into for like 18 months after August 2020, when I went after, the whole Rittenhouse thing. But we'll talk about that some other time.
We will continue talking about that. So thank you for that, Jim. And I know when we talked to Jack, you mentioned Occupy as well. So there are all these strains and all these tentacles. And I'm going to do a shameless plug for my Substack, Heidi Cuda's Substack, Betty Dangerous, because I'm reporting on all this stuff. So every investigation leads to an investigation. So the investigations I'm doing for Byline Times, Byline Supplement are long form, but there's always something that I think about going, what was happening then? And that's what led me to the Philippines. And there is a lot to unpack, and we will continue to do so. All right, gentlemen, thank you for that wonderful opening to our show. And let's jump into word phrase of the week.
Word phrase of the week this week is going to be interdiction. And why did I choose interdiction? Well, it is a military term for delaying, disrupting, destroying enemy forces or supplies. I'm going to change this a little bit. I'm going to say that another interdiction is the interruption of communication lines. And the reason I use this is because, as we all know, Elon Musk has purchased Twitter and is turning it into a fascist hellscape. But the other thing that's being kind of ignored, although you're starting to hear some stories about it, lines of communications for dissidents and people who are protesting are being interrupted. Anything that is in your DMs can and will be used against you, probably. China, as a country, their government flooded the hashtags highlighting the protests in China with, ads for escort agencies, etc. We know that Saudi Arabia is a major player. We know that when it came to Parler, Saudi Arabia had hundreds of thousands of bots on Parler. What do you think they're going to do to Twitter? And of course, the false idea of these democratic polls, which are obviously easily manipulated. And if you don't think online polls can be manipulated, I would refer to you to Bodie McBoatface. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. Jim?
Look, I mean, interrupting communication lines is the entire point of information warfare.
Right.
Right? Why was I taken off the battlefield on Twitter? Right? Because I was exposing motherfuckers who didn't want to be exposed. And so what did they do? They went after a line of communication that I had to 60,000 people and millions beyond that. Right?
Right.
That not to put myself, in some kind of special category, because there's thousands of us. High five, everybody! Like
everybody,
so many people
all of us
have literally been interdicted. That I think it's a very important concept. Not just to think about abstractly. We can look at it right here, right? Speaking of interdiction, and I'll be talking about this in Hellscape, what the fuck did Elon Musk do? He interdicted between everybody's communication.
Right.
Look at the trending topics. What nobody's talking about fucking, the Supreme Court or, all of these they're talking about Nazis.
Yeah, right.
Because the communications were intentionally interdicted to send everybody down to, is it okay to talk about Nazis? Right? We've moved the Overton window, which is the the accepted frame of discourse, all the way to Nazis. And that's all because these fucking fascists interdicted our communications on Twitter, and they'll be going after, everything else. So that's what I have to say.
However, you can still join us on Mastodon.
Yeah.
Fucking Mastodon. Everybody get the fuck off Twitter. You don't have to like cancel your Twitter account. You shouldn't do that. Keep your real estate, right? But Mastodon, I'm telling you, that's where it's the next place that people are going to communicate in a real way.
Content warning: some of the operators have already moved over to Mastodon, so just keep.
But they don't have the advantage anymore. They don't have the advantage.
They're very easy to block. They can't do the quote toot. It's been amazing. Yeah. More from Jim in my investigation coming up on just this subject and Byline Supplement, which should be airing this week. I got a hot story dropping today as well. It should already be out. So I'm just excited. I'm just excited. I'm invigorated by the work. I love working with you guys and learning from you. So let's go to why it matters.
Why does it matter? Why does it matter? Why high fidelity?
All right, first story this week. Dream a little deep fake of me. Now, first I got to show you this quick picture because this is important. All right, it's not the greatest picture; it's a little pixelated, but you can see the guy. This is our author of our story, and our actual story is these AI images look just like me. What does this mean for the future? These are all deep fakes of the author. The Google. Let me make sure I get this right. Google Dream Booth. Yeah, Google Dream Booth.
Sounds like a
it sounds like such a nice name.
Sounds like a nightmare.
It's such a nice name.
I don't. That sounds creepy as shit, man. That sounds like you going in the back of a store or something. Go to the booth in the back.
Let me finish out the story. Here's the interesting part about this AI. Right? Is this AI, when fed images of our author, was able, through the use of text prompts, to generate these images you see here of our author in different scenarios. Now, they look a little Photoshoppy, a little too smooth, a little computer generated.
Terrifying.
However, technology gets better over time, right? How long until they're able to generate a 3D?
Something terrible.
Have you seen the Chat GPT-3, the Chat GPT stuff from OpenAI?
I've seen it. I haven't played with it.
Very impressive. You can ask it to write you a poem about anything, and it will do a credible job. Or a news story, almost anything, and you may catch it here and there. But for the most part, it's really fucking impressive. AI is going to be the next frontier of disinformation. Once we start mixing in credibly real, pieces of disinformation that aren't just words, right?
Right.
Then we start to cognitively hack people in even more scary ways.
Wow.
I would like to point everyone to the William Gibson novel Idoru, in which an AI that is holographically generated wants human rights. And where does this?
We had the guy at Google. We had Blake Lemoine at Google going like, hey, I want rights for this fucking chatbot that I'm programming myself.
Yeah, right. So
right, because it feels real, but it's really just copying a bunch of other shit.
So corporations are people. We want AI to be recognized as people. What happens when AI start running corporations anyway? Just a thought.
Sounds like they already are as far as tech goes. So one thing that this reminded me of when you talk about Dream Booth is Edward G. Robinson sleeping the big sleep in Soylent Green. And for me, it's like, is that where we are headed? Are we headed towards some hellscape or not? Because I may want to go find my yurt and unplug.
Dystopian science fiction is not meant as an instruction manual. It's meant to be a warning.
Yeah, right.
But we seem to have lost that plot. Next story. Crypto cashes belly. The European Central Bank posted a blog post, and it's a wonderful, wonderful takedown of cryptocurrency. I mean, you see that first subheading right there. Bitcoin is rarely used for legal transactions. And it just goes in wholeheartedly on crypto and recognizes crypto for what it is, which is a multi-level marketing Ponzi scheme that is a direct attack on fiat currency. And this is why does this matter? Because, well, trying to tell you this for years. Our first episode was Dave Troy on how crypto is being weaponized. I'm glad the European Central Bank finally caught up. Hooray.
Yeah, right.
Crypto has always been an anti-democratic LARP.
Mm-hmm.
Designed to create a currency that allows a bunch of white nationalists and anarchists to trade money with each other freely and to get paid by foreign fucking nation states. Crypto has always been a scam. I have always said it, even as it was going to create. All you have to do is go to Twitter and like these people have no idea what they're crypto, blockchain, Web3, fucking. It's just a bunch of acronyms and bullshit.
I just block it all now. It don't buy into it, people.
I'm gonna say one more time. This guy, this FTX thing, remember FTX was supposed to be the safe one. It was supposed to be the good one. And this little fucking shrub just somehow managed to get $16 billion of people's money and then move it over to a gambling thing that he had and then gambled it away and then was like, sorry, I don't have your fucking money anymore. This is not real, ladies and gentlemen.
No, it's not. It was I when I was an investigative reporter in broadcast news, I did Ponzi scheme after Ponzi scheme, pyramid scheme after pyramid scheme. Unfortunately, this was always a pump and dump. It was never going to be good for the little guy. And guess what? This will not be the last one. They'll keep on doing it. They always rehash the same plot lines, giving them newer, fancier names. But this was always, a speculation market for money launderers and kidnappers and extortionists.
And so our final story, speaking of kidnapping and extortion, it's Wagner whacked. What happened was the United States State Department has blacklisted Wagner for religious persecution.
Oh.
And this has to do with the actions that Wagner took in Central African Republic, and there's stuff in Syria. We know they're committing atrocities in Ukraine. Now, the State Department did also add Nicaragua and Cuba, and Nicaragua I can understand. Cuba, however, just had to contend with revolutionary elements of the Catholic Church attempting to overthrow their government. I'm torn on that one. But anyway, why does this matter? Well, people need to pay attention to who these evil people are. That's why it matters.
Well, I mean, Wagner is just Putin's private army, right? Yeah. Let's be clear. And Eric Prince is involved in Wagner. Putin, as Eric Prince admitted, wanted him to basically run Wagner. He said, I want you to run a private military operation for me. And he says he declined. But bullshit.
Given the similarity in operations between Eric Prince and Evgeny Prigozhin, you kind of have to wonder, are they communicating with?
Dude, Eric Prince tried to get control of Ukraine's military supply lines by corrupting Zelensky. This is documented. He's been in there for decades.
I see seashells in the Seychelles where I'm just having beers with Kremlin cutouts.
Oh yeah. I just ran into the head of Putin's venture capital fund or whatever the fuck it was.
What a strange coincidence.
Beers among friends.
Seashells in the bar. Whoa.
But one thing serious about this, when you talk about Prigozhin, who I always go back to because his mug is always, popping up everywhere. This show is about disinformation. We investigate disinformation. And of course, it's about many things, but that's always been the core. So you have a guy who's scouring prisons to try to fill his mercenary army to go commit war crimes in Ukraine, who also, according to our own Justice Department, headed up the active measures hybrid warfare operation against our elections in 2016. So it's just, people have to stop thinking that kinetic warfare with bombs is any different or less dangerous than what is happening to our brains thanks to people like Prigozhin. Talk about a chief architect of, these reality bending campaigns. There you go. So it's very sinister.
However, there is one campaign, and I don't know if it's disinformation or not, but there seems to be some gentlemen from Russia who are familiar with Evgeny Prigozhin and his time incarcerated there, who are releasing some very, very interesting information. I'd like to see more of that.
I personally would
That
not
was
like
very
to see any of
cryptic.
it. I would not like to see any of it. But yes, if you look at Prigozhin, look up his teen history and see what Hi-Fi is referencing. Thank you so much for being so eloquent, Hi-Fi. Do appreciate it when you couch the.
Wrap my subversion in poetic language. Yes.
Yes, exactly. All right. Thank you for that incredible Why It Matters. Let's get into Hellscape.
Jim Stewartson's Hellscape. Oh, fuck.
We're going to talk about a PsyOp that was executed by the CEO of the town square on Friday. This is one of the most blatant and embarrassing escapades that I've ever seen. And for the most part, and I think this is correct, it's been ignored by the media. But I just wanted to briefly kind of go over what happened here. Elon Musk bought Twitter for $44 billion. Now, why did he do that, right? Obviously not to make money. Every single thing that he has done has reduced the value in sort of normal terms of Twitter, because advertisers are running away because it's a bunch of Nazis, right? But he also bought an enormous amount of content, right? He bought all of the corporate emails between all of the employees at Twitter. So millions of emails between people that can be mined for basically propaganda purposes. That's not even talking about user information, which he also bought, including everyone's DMs. But let's just talk about what he is doing here. He is taking Twitter emails, internal Twitter emails, giving those to Russian propagandists, and then broadcasting live on Twitter a LARP, a live action role play of a reality that he wanted everyone to believe. And that reality that he wanted them to believe was that there was collusion between the Democrats and Twitter to suppress the Hunter Biden story in order to change the outcome of the election. That's what this is. This is big lie propaganda being pushed by the CEO of Twitter live in real time for 120 million people that follow him and hundreds of millions of people who cannot avoid this. And the reason you can't avoid it is because all it does, this is all that trends for fucking days. It's been Elon Musk and Matt Taibbi, who is the Kremlin propagandist that he gave these Twitter files to. So I've talked in the past about the horseshoe, right? The horseshoe meaning the political spectrum where the far right and the far left work together to create discord, right? To create a nihilistic third position where all hope goes to die, right? Dan Bongino, one of the most blatant Kremlin propagandists on earth, quote tweeting another one of the most blatant Kremlin propagandists on earth on opposite sides of the political spectrum. Bongino being a MAGA junkie, Matt Taibbi being a far left, journalist who used to do things like write about the vampire squid of Goldman Sachs 10 years ago when I thought he was a good writer, and now has turned himself into a literal Kremlin propagandist, full stop. That's all he does is find ways to apologize for Russian imperialism. So to make it even more blatant, the entire thing is just a carbon copy of WikiLeaks in 2016, right? Now, to make this even more blatant, and I don't have it here, but Elmo, which is what I call him in case you missed it, is doing a poll about whether or not Julian Assange and Edward Snowden should be pardoned or not. And he's just asking questions, right? Should these literal traitors to the United States who got people killed, who exposed, people who are undercover, should these people be pardoned? Anyway, so this entire thing is based on the way that WikiLeaks worked, which, if you think about it, right, WikiLeaks got hacked emails from the Russians, published them, and then selected bits of those were taken out of context to make insinuations about Hillary Clinton, right?
Right.
So the Russians hacked the DNC's emails, which included Hillary's aide, John Podesta. One of those emails was about a performance art show that had to do with this woman who was a little bit out there, and they took that email that Podesta didn't even respond to and turned it into Pizzagate. That's all it takes, right? You just get some real stuff, and then you find anything to make a story out of. And that's literally all Elon Musk is trying to do with these new Twitter files, right? So Matt Taibbi, Putin apologist, says that he had to agree to certain conditions that in exchange for the opportunity to cover a unique and explosive story, he couldn't give it to his Substack readers. But in exchange, he's been trending for days. So the net effect of Elmo's PsyOp here so far is to elevate the profile of one of the most embarrassing Kremlin propagandists on earth in the project of trying to find targets of ex-Twitter employees, Democrats, anybody he can think of, by sending out all of these emails, WikiLeaks style, to people like Matt Taibbi to make stories out of. It's no different from WikiLeaks, and he knows it. Another thing that he's trying to do that I think is worth noting, Jack Dorsey, who ran Twitter, is and has been conspiring with Elon Musk the entire time. And one of the most hilarious things about this particular PsyOp is that part of it is that you're supposed to let Jack Dorsey completely off the hook. Matt Taibbi said an amazing subplot is that it was all done without the knowledge of Jack Dorsey. He had no fucking idea, right? And it took forever because of all these Democrats that worked at Twitter. Literally, that's what Elon Musk is saying. Because of all the Democrats that worked at Twitter, that Jack Dorsey was fooled. And, by all means, you should not pay any attention. Now, remember, 6 months ago, Jack Dorsey said, Elon is the singular solution I trust. I trust his mission to extend the light of consciousness. Jack Dorsey is in the same long-termist cult that Elon Musk is. These billionaires who believe that they are so smart, that they are so above us little people, that we should take our medicine, that it's really for the good of humanity. And Elon Musk, racist, emerald money grabbing, misogynist shithead, is the guy that needs to lead humanity into whatever fucking promised land they think we're going to. I don't think so. Now, if it was just Elon Musk, right? That would be bad enough. He's the richest man in the world. He's got 120 million followers now on his personal PsyOp platform. But he's got the entire Republican Party ready to take his bullshit and go do congressional hearings. We're not just talking about some out-of-control rich 4chan troll. We're talking about the government of the United States being weaponized based on this bullshit. Again, Taibbi says it's all because of the Democrats, because all the people who worked at Twitter were Democrats. It gets worse.
God.
Glenn Greenwald is going to be on Tucker Carlson's program and then on Rumble to talk about Matt Taibbi's Twitter files. How many Russians can we get? Glenn Greenwald got compromised a decade ago. Tucker Carlson is doing great replacement theory and Putin propaganda every fucking day. Rumble, all it does is Kremlin propaganda. That's all it does. Go there. It's all literal Kremlin propaganda. And then Matt Taibbi has been a Putin apologist since he joined Gray Zone in 2017.
And then who paid for Rumble?
Peter fucking Thiel.
And JD Vance.
And JD fucking Vance.
Right. So, look, as I've said, this is not just a left thing or a right thing. One of the most important things we can understand is that Taibbi, right, who is all the way on the left, is the mouthpiece for propaganda designed to be consumed all the way on the right. I'll give you an example. I need to just to let this fucking sink in for a second. After Elon Musk allowed Kanye West to broadcast all over his platform his love for Hitler, right? Which Elon said, "Oh, when you posted that swastika, you've gone too far." What did he do immediately after that? He invited back specifically after, I don't know, this guy's been banned for 9 years or something. This is the editor of the Daily Stormer. intentionally let back on Twitter by Elon Musk to say things like saying you love Hitler is not even a big deal. Look, we need to understand that this is literal warfare now, in the open, by the most powerful people in the world against us, right? It's not hidden anymore. There's no more, there's no hiding it. And yet we still can't talk about it in the way that we need to, which is that Elon Musk is an enemy combatant working for the Kremlin, working for his own internal cult to just bring down American democracy because he thinks he knows better. So I just need to say, to wrap this up here, it's go time, you guys.
Yeah.
It's right in the fucking open now. It's not any longer hidden.
Right.
And it's time for us to start talking about it like what it is, which is a fucking war. It's in our face, and it's time to call it out.
Oh, we are so excited to bring back our guest, Jack A. Bryan, producer, director. You guys know him from Active Measures and The Search for Q. His new podcast, American PsyOp, is absolutely vital in understanding active measures and how people are targeted. This particular series focuses on Wesley Clark Jr., son of General Wesley Clark. Let's watch a clip and then let's bring in Jack.
When you're completely surrounded by everybody thinking the same thing, you think, okay, I'm just going to play along. Their end goal is something good, which is, dude, we have to do something about climate change.
Did this crew of people also speak to your wife?
Yeah, they all had come over to the house, and my wife is like, who the fuck are all these people suddenly all around us? But for me, it felt fun. It felt like I'm doing something good that's righteous and just. You know, if someone comes over and they tell you you're bound for a very special mission, you have a very powerful spirit inside of you, and you hear these things, and then later a different person brings up these same ideas to reinforce the belief in you. And I was like, give me more of that crazy. That crazy's good. They were all trying to push me in this really specific path of UFOs, Saint Germain, theosophy. So all these people start reaching out to me, and I mean from every nook and cranny of reality you can think of.
Wow, that was so amazing. I don't know about you guys, but I listened to all 4 of the episodes released already. Okay, Jack A. Bryan, we are so happy to have you back with us again. I did a little intro, but can you just tell our viewers a little bit more about your background and why you put yourself through this really difficult work before we jump in and talk about your new podcast?
Yeah, so this sort of journey kind of started for me in 2017, and we were working on the documentary Active Measures, which is about Trump and Russia, which came out the following year. But we were looking into any leads we could track down, and we heard this story from Wesley Clark Jr., and the entire thing seemed completely unbelievable and completely fabricated. And we kind of just dismissed it. And the thing is, when you're working in this space, if you hear something you don't believe, you really have to dismiss it. Like, you really have to be like, I can't let that affect how I see future things. And it's very hard not to do that, but you have to be kind of diligent about it. And it became this really annoying thing because it'd be like, oh, I know, I've heard of that before. I've heard of that kind of thing. I've heard of that person. Yeah. Where did I hear that? Oh, Wes. Oh, well, throw that out then. And it just kept happening over and over again as we were looking into Russia, as we started looking into QAnon especially. And at a certain point, it became too many data points to ignore. And so we decided we had to sort of go back and try to figure out what was going on and try to at least get closer to figuring that out. And so that's how this podcast was sort of born. And we started working on it last March, and it has been a pretty long journey to get it to where it is now.
Wow. For me, it was chilling because we have people in common, as I'm sure some of the guys probably also have some people in common with Wes. But for me, what was so chilling was that everything that was ever any good and decent in the real resistance toward this Kremlin infiltration into our country was infiltrated. And I think his story is really illustrative of that.
Yeah. No, go ahead, Jim. Sorry, please.
No, I was just going to say, full disclosure, I was there for a few of those conversations, and I had the exact same reaction. You know, Wes is incredibly believable, incredibly humble and real, but the shit he was saying was so nuts. It was hard to believe until as things move forward, as you say, those dots just kept connecting.
Yeah.
So I'm incredibly glad to hear it all put together in such a coherent way, to the extent that that's possible.
Yeah, what a daunting undertaking.
Yeah, no, it was a lot, and it's been a lot. I mean, and also a lot at kind of every stage, but it was also, I mean, I really love editing. I mean, this is a little bit more of a different space than the show, but I love editing. Editing for me is really like whether it's filmmaking or podcasts, that the editing is where a lot of the real writing and story taking takes place, and that process was sort of the fun part for me. Of like, you know, a lot of doing these was like, these are really important stories. We have a few really important stories we wanted to tell, this being the first one, the most, and probably the most current in terms of its context, and well, generally, and podcasting seemed like the easiest way to do that, and tell it in a full way. And yeah, the response has been amazing. Like, really, we did not think we would. I mean, I woke up this morning, we're at number 4 on true crime charts, and we're number 13 overall on
Holy
Apple.
shit.
And that was not a thing we thought was going to be happening.
Oh, we're so happy for you.
It's really been amazing, and it's rewarding, because it's also that kind of thing where every major podcast company turned us down.
Of course.
And now we're, you know, I mean, we have to maintain, and, you know, we have to keep going, and, you know, we're still early in the run, but it's really, really rewarding, and it's really relieving.
Absolutely. All that work, and to see it be successful. One thing, can you please tell our viewers who have not yet watched or listened to the series, although we encouraged everybody last week to please listen before this show, what some of the main takeaways are thematically that people should be alerted to? Because, I mean, there's a litany of them.
Yeah, I think that, well, the first thing I'm going to say, one thing quickly, is that I do have to be a little bit coy, because we're still on episode 4, and we've got a lot, and I can't, but because that's annoying, and I understand that that's annoying, I'm going to give you guys a real fun tease, a little Easter egg for later on.
We'll take it.
That we haven't revealed yet. So I'll give you something for being annoying and holding back. But I think that for me, a big part of this is, and I would say our big, you know, purpose for me behind this is that exposing that these operations and the operations that have been going on against the American public for the last 4 years are one, much more consciously driven, and have origins that are not that go back. And that these are things that actually happen to people. Yeah. And also with that, most of the people who think, oh, I got targeted by the government and blah, 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 most of those people are not right. They're incorrect. And they're saying, and there is a paranoia, and one has to acknowledge that is a big part of why I think a lot of people who fall into these things don't think that they can talk about it, or don't even believe what happened to them. And so both things are true at the same time. And I think that we shouldn't dismiss people's claims of being targeted in operations, because it really does happen. The internet's made it a lot easier than it used to be.
That's absolutely right.
But also that doesn't mean that every single person who's like, I'm a targeted person, that you take it at face value. These are really serious claims, but when they start checking out, like, take them seriously.
Thank you for
That's
that.
the hard part about all sort of internet operations, right? Is they, generally speaking, the rule is you cover up a real conspiracy with a fake one, right? Or you point out all the people who have incorrectly been targeted out of paranoia or whatever it is, to cover up for the fact that they're actually, these operations really do exist.
Yeah.
So it's great to see or know that's going to be elucidated. It's very important to me, because there is a lot of this that goes on. I've been a real target myself, and it's hard to explain without sounding crazy.
Yeah, and also I think a really important part for this and me, I think that a part that really helps people understand what's going on more, is that there really is a lot of overlap, almost by design, really, completely by design. There's a lot of overlap between the victims and the perpetrators. And who is a victim and who is a perpetrator is often a lot more gray than it appears. Because if you're targeting somebody to do something and trying to push them to do something, often the thing that you're pushing them to do is to speak out against somebody or call out somebody. And so that person is being manipulated, but they're being manipulated to attack somebody else.
Yes.
And so they have this, they have become both at the same time. And I don't think anybody ever comes up to anybody and goes, hey, I work with the Russian government. We want to cause chaos in this country. Would you like to sign up for this program? No, the money that comes in, which some of it, which seems very much to be Russian. I don't think most of the people that are getting it, if they know enough to know that that's where it's coming from, also know enough to ignore it and kind of think, oh, well, it's nothing else. Like the Mujahideen didn't think the CIA won the war against the Soviets. Right. You know what I mean?
Right.
Regardless of how much money and weapons they were provided, they won it. And in the same way that, from the perspective of the school of fish, the sharks are working together. From the perspective of the sharks, they're competing for fish. And so even people that are in these ops don't necessarily feel like, oh, well, I'm working with these guys. We're just kind of working in the same direction.
Right.
And so these things are elusive, not just to the people that are targeted, but by the people that are in them in some cases.
That is one of the great things that's already you're laying the groundwork for in your podcast, and something that Jim and I, and likely Hi-Fi, have experienced in our personal lives. I've unfortunately become a bit of I've definitely investigated information warfare for the past 6 years. And one of the things I learned very early on is there really are no rear areas, which is why that paranoia occurs, because it's the are you or aren't you? It's like Cold War spy games. And so with somebody like Wesley Clark Jr., whose father headed NATO, whose father is a general, whose father ran for president, these are exactly the types of people whose various relationships could easily be targeted with information warfare. And also, it's so inexpensive. In some of the investigations I've done, part of the reason why there are no rear areas is it doesn't take much to get people to become part of an operation knowingly and unknowingly.
Yeah. I mean, you can pay their airfare if there's a place that they want to go to. I mean, that can be enough to get them to make a phone call, visit somebody on a thing. And we found not in this project, but in previous projects, we found for some of the YouTubers that have, 40,000 views consistently, that it seemed like that they were getting paid. I mean, we saw receipts, but getting paid just a couple $100 a week through their Patreon to kind of like, hey, just, if you push this, and they know if I push this message, I'll get another 250. Yeah. There's no contract. There's no like thought out thing, but he knows, oh, I got a little thing. All right. Next week, if I do it, I get another little thing.
Yeah.
And if you're living in, the Southwest, not
Yeah.
near a city, maybe your rent is a couple $100, a few $100 a month.
Yeah.
And that might be enough to get you just paying your rent.
Wow.
And
Wow.
so, it's I think you're right that the internet has made it easy to get cheap people to do things cheap.
So
the other thing that's made it easy is crypto,
yes.
right? Because all these people could, you just have a link and the money just disappears in the wall somewhere, and
crypto comes up eventually in this series.
Nice.
So one question I had for you, given the subject matter of episode 4, is something I'm very interested in, which is the intersection of theosophy and especially the I am cult and all of its offshoots. And especially that intersects with both Raspberry and QAnon, I think, is a really underreported set of facts. And I was wondering if you could talk about that a little bit.
Absolutely. So the I am cult, I think, is a really important institution that really we don't talk about very often and doesn't come up. But it started in the 1930s by basically a con man named Guy Ballard and his wife Edna. And the way that they started their ranks was they pulled from, I believe it was the White Shirts. It was a Nazi organization that they basically were able to get the membership rolls for. And so they started pushing theosophy and things like that because those were all parts of Nazism. And they also incorporated a whole bunch of other stuff, invented this notion of the Ascended Masters, which was a play on the Ascended Something, which is an Alice Bailey thing.
Alice Bailey
thing. Yeah. The whatever, doesn't matter. So they kind of create this cult. They figure out direct mailing. They just keep on adding Ascended Masters and Ascended Masters. The main one is Saint Germain, but it's this notion of that we are all the divine and that we can rise up and become divine entities, basically ourselves. This cult
master was George Washington, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, well, he was so Godfrey King Ray, which was the name that Guy Ballard took, certainly claimed to be a reincarnation of George Washington,
right?
And that George Washington was inspired by all of these things, and is a very, very nationalistic. They really hated Roosevelt. A lot of conspiracy theories directed at Roosevelt. And then Guy Ballard dies in the late 30s. All of this mail fraud is revealed, and the U.S. government starts going after them. At this point, they have probably like 50,000 like core hardcore members, but like up to 1 million people who are into the cult. The way to think about it maybe is like there's a lot of people that really believe in and read their astrological charts who don't consider themselves astrologists, right? Like they could be Christians, they could be. And so that's the way to think about that outer million who's into it, are people who are like the ideas, attracted to it, but 55,000 really core, dedicated, like members. And so as this blows up, the cult kind of goes underground. It still exists. It has offshoots. The Church Universal and Triumphant is probably the most sort of well-known offshoot of that cult.
We had Sean Prophet on the show, who is Elizabeth Clare Prophet's son, who was the one who ran the cult.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. And so there have been, offshoots and reimaginings, and where I first, and working with Jim, I guess Jim and I met, August of 2020.
Yep.
And this was both of our sort of, I guess we hadn't, I don't know if we had, but the cult was very clearly a part of all the QAnon stuff we were seeing. And that was the first time I kind of was able to identify what it was in terms of by name, like, oh, that's what this is. But I had encountered it, not really knowing, when I was working on the active measures thing, because the person who put me in touch with Wes, as you'll hear about in a later episode, this is another little reveal, was Nora, who is in episode 4 and 3 and is a character in there and who I've known for a long time. And that was the first time where I was like, oh, this is the Nora stuff? Oh, that's what she was talking about. Okay, I just, because, somebody invites you over and they're talking that you're just like, okay, like I'm an atheist. So I'm used to being like, yay, religious stuff. Okay, over here. I'm going to be polite. But I can't engage in a conversation without you getting upset. So I'm just going to be polite and say hello. Yes, nice. And
hello, yes, nice.
Smile and nod, Jack. Smile and nod.
Hello, yes, nice. Wow.
Portals, huh? Oh yeah, okay.
Hello, yes, nice. That is a theme.
Yeah, and so it was. I think that it is. And basically the cult itself, I should go into the beliefs. It is sort of a catch-all thing. They pull in a lot of things from every religion, and they like the offshoot stuff. Okay, so like a lot of the things that we get into in the show is Wes comes to believe he is Metatron, who is an angel who was transferred from a prophet Enoch. Okay, so where does that story come from? How did it get into I Am? Well, okay, so there is a character named Enoch in the Bible who walks with God. There's like one sentence about him, that's it. But in the late 1800s, I want to say early 1900s, ancient texts were discovered that were kind of contemporaneous, like offshoots of other things that just never made it into the Bible. That were, there's hundreds of these things of like this story that people thought was kind of cool and developed further and da-da-da-da. But like, there's a bunch of these things. So one of these was found, and it was the book of Enoch. I think there's 3 books. And I mean, part of it has made its way into like Ethiopian Christianity, but that's a very less sect of Christianity. Like it's very all over the place. And so because it was this other sort of spiritualism, wasn't directly connected to Christianity, but it had these sort of Christian elements and things as part of it, they were able to basically take that story and incorporate it in. So it's about, stuff like that. Sorry, Hi-Fi, you were...
I just, so what you're telling me is, and ignoring the fact that people are basing their lives on the scribblings of goat herders from thousands of years ago. But what you're telling me is that all these ideologies, these cult ideologies, are all syncretic. They're all smashing stuff together. And they're actually so not innovative that they're reusing characters from other narratives.
Oh, that's all it is. And it's actually the smartest thing to do, because what you want to do is you want to say, I'm not just inventing a new religion.
Yeah.
There's precedent here. Other people knew the secret truth before our people. And so what you do is you find little things here and there, offshoots that never really made it. Like, no, see, back 1,000 years ago, they knew. And they were saying the same thing that we're saying. And because there's, the word like I am that I am is like I think it's a Sanskrit thing that they think they're taking it from. But also the I am is a thing in the Bible. So both of them knew. So those words, the ideas aren't significant. It's just that we translate those words into the same words in English, because the words that they translate to in English are the same. They are clearly saying the exact same thing, and it's all one idea. And that's the thing with almost any organization, is you want to predate your movement as not a new thing. We're getting back to the original. We're getting back to the real ideas. And so anytime you can do that, you're going to have more success. Yeah.
Make I am great again.
Yeah.
Syncretism is I think one of the most important words here. And speaking of syncretism and I am and Church Universal and Triumphant, I found Mike Flynn reciting and having a Christian church recite back to him a prayer by Elizabeth Clare Prophet, which was an I am cult in a Christian church. Basically,
and we might be using that clip at some point, though. Jim, you're appropriate person to credit on that one, right?
Yes.
All right, good. That
Yes.
was one thing I want to check with you first. Yes. Okay, we credit you. Right?
Yes, I mean, it was a collective effort, a lot of us, but I was the one who was who watches all of Mike Flynn's speeches, and I was like,
Mhm.
7 rays? What the fuck is that?
Yeah,
I
right.
was like, what? That doesn't sound super Christian. I'm also an atheist, but I've gotten myself like a master's in religious studies over the last
Right.
couple of years.
Well, that's the whole
And
point though, right, Jim? Because
yeah,
what I want to bring it back to is how this magical thinking and these plot lines and storylines are sold to be weaponized to infiltrate and push disinformation, correct? Or push active measures. So it's not just that there's all this weird shit out there and isn't that weird? It's like, no, this is actually part of the entry points in order to do this type of hybrid warfare.
So yeah, I think this is a really, really, really important point, and I think that this is sort of the largest reason why we're kind of here is because it's not. Also, I think this might be a good time to say it. It's not just Wes. We've now heard of 4 or 5 people that have gone through a shockingly similar kind of thing. And I think one of the reasons that IAM works so well for this is because they have all of these different characters. So one guy that we just heard about, he thought he was Buddha. And why? He's Indian. Now, there's not a lot of Indian Buddhists, but Buddha was from India. And so he thought he was a reincarnation of that, and that was that association. Wes thought he was Metatron because he grew up Catholic. There is that element of Enoch is a character in the Bible. So you can hang your hat on it almost no matter what your background is. But the technique in real life, what it seems to be, is that they cause a lot of chaos in someone's life. Whether it's online activity, whether it's in person, get that person to not sleep very much, get that person on edge. There might be a drugging component involved because everybody talks about having physical symptoms that are, heart racing. One person, their friend talked about them being like seeming impaired, like drunk as they're walking, clumsy as they're walking around, kind of thing during this sort of heightened period. And then as that is growing and growing, somebody comes in, some entity, whether it's an email account or a person knocking on their door, and that person is going to take away the chaos. And that person is now their best friend. And the chaos goes away. And now that person has the ability to push the target in certain ways. And when the target doesn't go along, the chaos comes back. And when they start going along again, the chaos goes away. And it becomes a very way of training people. And that seems to be, I mean, even to the words chaos is a weirdly, like, when we're talking to friends of people this has happened to, or people that happen to, that is always the word that is used. And so, yeah, that I think is being weaponized. I think people know how to do it and have been doing it, systematically for quite a bit, and it's being used for political ends.
Another word, hi-fi, I'm sorry, just jump in right after this, but another word that I want to introduce, of course, is trauma. Because if you've been through this, whether you can prove it or not, whether it's escalated up to the level that Jim has suffered and Wes has suffered, it's like, I know in my life, for my work, when it's happened to me, it's not only created chaos, but it also created a lot of trauma.
Yeah, that is such an important point. I mean, the trauma is the key, and that I should have zeroed on that, because that is the point of the chaos. Because when somebody is traumatized or is triggered with past trauma, it destroys rational thinking. You're thinking with your spine, and that is the easiest way to manipulate somebody. But also you are pulling somebody out of their rational mind, and so they are also not fully in control either. Right? Like you can't be in control fully of somebody who's out of control. So you're creating a very dangerous situation where you can direct somebody, but you can't control them. And so I think for a lot of these things, it is people are playing with fire. And even if they were just doing what they would want to do, it would already be incredibly dangerous.
Well, the dangerousness is the point, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean,
Absolutely.
active measures, by the way, if you have not seen active measures, go
So
watch active
brilliant.
measures, because if you you want to understand what the reason for all this stuff is at the end of the
Yes.
day, the reason for it is to subvert American democracy and subvert anybody who might help American democracy. For example, the son of the head of NATO, who might have something to say that people would listen to. Subverting him and making him crazy is an active measure,
Mm-hmm.
and I think it's important that people understand that. And I think your film with our mutual friend Marley is an amazing introduction to that.
Thank you.
So brilliant, so brilliant. And the music, I always talk about the music. I mean, I had that on in a house where I was, because of my work and because of the fact that I was working on a campaign to get rid of Dana Rohrabacher, and because my candidate was Muslim American, and because all of this stuff was happening to me, I had that film on a 24/7 loop. It was like nurturing my soul, because I wanted to say, see, like nobody around me believed me, but see, there it is. But also just seriously, not only, I mean, I could talk about the music for days because it was really, really brilliant, but I really think it's so important. The guys and I talked about it earlier. We see what happened in 2016, but what we haven't done a good enough job of was seeing all the pieces put in place prior to, and who was behind it, and how that was happening globally. Earlier we were talking about a new documentary about Philippine troll operations and the hierarchy behind them and all of the agent provocateurs. It's a really brilliant documentary, but what really happened, it's called Internet Trolls: The Unseen Force Behind Philippines Politics.
Right.
So there's so much to talk about, how they weaponize celebrity websites and then twist them into, political websites. But for me, the most important thing for me, and I'm going to be talking about this film a lot, is the fact that they were ready in 2016 to create disinformation to help Duterte win. So what were they doing in 2015, 2014, 2013, 2012, 2011, 2010? We all know so much of what was happening in Russia, thanks to the brilliant indictments out of the special counsel. But, there's globally this was happening, and I'm looking for the connective tissue globally.
Yeah, I think that you made such an important point that I always think about. So whenever I start investigating anything, one of the things I've learned is that for any operation that involves influence, the influence component will always be the easiest thing to find, because it's the part you can't hide. Mm-hmm. You want to tell the audience, some entity or person has to tell the audience. So that's your point of contact. That is your best, like, okay, well, this is something I know is operational. Mm-hmm. And then what you don't do is you don't move forwards into the operation. You go backwards before the operation and see, okay, well, who are these people working with? What is that network? How are these? And then you go back and you map that out, and then you see which of those characters are also in this one. Mm-hmm. And so going backwards is always, because once an operation or anything begins, everyone knows to shut up. But when you meet a guy and you're like, this guy's a nice guy, I like hanging out with him, you don't know to hide that. You put it on social media. But then 3 months later, when you're like, okay, let's do this thing together, it's quiet. Yeah. That's the worst place to look for stuff. Right. And so, yes, you have to go back. You have to see how, because relationships, people are people. Yeah. Just because somebody is running an operation doesn't mean that they're not the same petty dick that works in your office, right?
Yes.
People have personal falling outs. People have, it's all these things are about relationships. So people tend to work with the same people they've worked with, it's like any network. And so we tend to think of these things as like, they have to be like Bond's Spectre, but like, no, it's like any network of people, except they're usually
Ted from accounting. Basically.
Yeah. Except they're a little shittier and a little bit more petty and a little bit more horrible.
Absolutely.
And they lie a lot more.
And they lie. Well, I
depends on where you work.
I guess it's like I work in film, so I don't know.
Yeah. Well, that was yes.
Sorry. I was just going to say, I mean, speaking of going back, right? Heidi mentioned Rohrbacher and the fact that she got attacked because she was up against Rohrbacher. Rohrbacher, I have to say, has been associated with Mr. Eric Prince for several decades. And Eric Prince, if I'm not mistaken, comes into the story about Wes because some of his operatives were involved in Standing Rock and that whole thing. To me, it's very interesting that many of these stories, many of these operations back up to a very few people, right? Eric Prince, Steve and Mike Flynn, all of these kind of anti-democratic operatives that have been around for a long time doing the same thing. I was just wondering, I get that feeling all the time, like, oh shit. It always goes back to, a very small number of people who need to be in prison. And I was just wondering on this show, as you were producing it, how often did you have that feeling?
Oh, a lot. I mean, that was actually, I mean, so that's the thing, is that as the show goes on, it becomes a little bit more clip heavy, if that makes sense. Like, so far we've cut to some clips and to sort of reinforce that, like, what he's saying is happening. And as the story gets gets even crazier, we rely on that more because as the claims become more extraordinary, we think we need to back them up a little more.
Right.
And so, it was a constant surprise that we would be like, okay, well, this guy seems like a thing. This guy seems like he is part of, sorry, I got my cat. He does not respect the fact that I'm being interviewed.
That's the best cat.
Can we
Bring the
see
cat.
the cat? Because
Jack has the best cat.
Oh my gosh.
She's very small and just you want to just, I love.
Oh,
wow, beautiful.
That's the promo pic right there.
Absolutely. Yeah, she's beautiful.
I was out of town for a little bit. She's very, very needy right now.
Very animal friendly show.
Yeah.
I don't blame her for being needy. Yeah, no, it's bananas how often the tentacles of all of this stuff does go back to a handful of people, which again is why I'm so focused on what was happening in the lead up to 2016 globally. And obviously Cambridge Analytica, we talk about, some of these characters, so much of that was happening globally. I definitely want to bring something back to Wes Clark as a person. Two quick things. One, being in Hollywood, I totally understand his point of view. You meet a bunch of characters, I loved when he said, I believed what people told me. Like, I appreciated that because that is part of being a creative. And I love his laugh. Every time he laughs, I'm just like, I love this guy so much. But I shared this with Hi-Fi and Jim. His father, at a Milken lecture that I went to, I think in 2014, which I actually documented and wrote about, was really the first to really scare the shit out of me about cyber war. And he actually laid the groundwork for my understanding and kind of my mental preparation for it. So I wasn't terribly surprised in 2016, 2017. I wonder how much that Wes was aware of it. He must have been.
I think he was. I think that he didn't think of it, but I think that it's one thing to be aware of something in the abstract. I think that is one of the reasons why both Wes was one of the reasons why he's really good at a good interview for this and why he's very good at telling a story is that he does understand these concepts in the abstract, but he never applied them to his life.
Got it.
And so now he's able to, and he's looking at it in those terms. And so he does have a really great context to understand these things. But as with anything, like you have to apply it. And if you're not, coming at it from a different part of his head,
Brilliant. Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay. I have I have 2 rapid fire questions,
So,
and then I have a third question that I want to end with. Here's
Right.
my first rapid fire question. As far as I can tell, the network that we are mapping here in American PsyOp and back through operations, etc., is the same network that is involved in the deaths of Danny Casolaro, Gary Webb, and Michael Hastings. Does this ever give you cause for concern?
Well, I'll say a couple things. One is I don't know that we're really looking at just one network, and that's the thing that's going to kind of come up in the next episode. Is that I think that if I mean, listen, there is still a large degree of mystery for what happened to Wes, but if I had to guess, I think that he was targeted in one intelligence operation and then got himself into this thing where he was overlapping with a bunch of different operations from a bunch of different people, a bunch of different operators. So that is my best guess as to what happened to him now and what will happen to him over the next, 5 episodes.
Okay.
That first thing. Second thing, I'm not too worried about anything happening to me. Like I think I find myself a little bit agnostic on the Hastings thing. I'm not dismissive of it at all, but I don't feel like I have enough. I know people that feel very, very certain he was killed and have very good reasons for it. And I know people who are like, his family is just like, I don't know. So I don't feel like I have, but yeah, sure. I guess. I mean, not really though. No, maybe I should be, but no. I mean, I think that, yeah. I mean, if it's late night and I hear a noise, it's the way I think about it is like when I was in New York for 9/11, and if I heard a bang or a blast a year later when I was living in Montana, one of the range of possibilities that pop in my head is like, a bomb? Was that a ridiculous thing to think? It was a ridiculous thing to think. Did everybody in America kind of think that ridiculous thing at the time? We all did. So I think of it as, I don't really think that there's a real danger to me. Like even if it was a Hastings thing, like they were, if that was a thing, like I feel like they were like, well, he betrayed our trust. Like Mike Flynn never trusted me.
Yeah. Right.
And so right. I think that's usually where people get killed, is when people were like, when you take money or you take information from somebody and they feel like you're on the same page, and then they feel betrayed by you. So maybe that's just a story I tell myself, and maybe, I don't know. I don't feel like, I feel like I need an actual threat to feel like I'm actually threatened. And if plausible, here's what I think of it. If plausible deniability works for them, it works for me.
Just hold on, Heidi. Hold on. I'm not done. Okay. So the second question I have for you.
Oh, yes.
Is, in all of this research you've done, and maybe this is just because of my particular background and what I did on the internet when I was younger, have you ever met anyone who had operations being run against them that turned it around and ran operations back against the people doing the operations?
Oh, that's interesting. No, because I think that people don't know what's going on when it's happening.
Hi, how you doing?
Well, I guess. Oh, there you go. Okay, fair enough. Fair. Yes, I guess I have. Sorry. Well, yeah, not in person. I haven't.
Yeah.
Fair. We have to get a beer, man. All right.
We have to. You're in LA, right?
No, I'm in Ohio.
Well, you're in Ohio. I knew you were in
LA.
That's right.
He's all like Akron and Cleveland proud. High five. Fair. Before you do your final, we'll give you the final one. I got 2 quick comments, and then Jim, and then high five, because I know we're already at time. The guys know that when I was writing Tupac's book with his bodyguard, I would get death threats faxed to me, which tells you how long ago that was. But also our friend John Sweeney, who's a war correspondent who is very, very up in Putin's grill, says, they may hate me, but I'm probably 841 down on the list, of their priorities of who they target. And so that is also a way to look at it. So it was very important to me I don't want to let you go before we talk about this. 2016 election happens. Wes Clark Sr. says to Junior, America's going to be like Russia now. Anyone who sticks their head out is going to get smacked, take a job, look after your family. Wes heard it, and just like you said, he didn't apply it to his life. But if Wes Clark Sr. knew that that election meant we were going to be like Russia, then our intelligence agencies must have known we were going to be like Russia. And what the fuck? It's 2022. Like, where are my perp walks?
Yeah, and so my feeling behind this is, I noticed something, and maybe this is just me noticing a thing and I'm wrong, but it seemed to me that like when the first impeachment happened, I really admired the Foreign Service officers that were talking about standing up to him and all that stuff. I think they did an amazing job. And I think that they're wonderful people and all that stuff. But there was one thing that disturbed me about what they were saying. And it was the same thing that disturbed me about James Comey's logic for releasing the Hillary investigation right before the election, was that their reasoning for everything was defending the integrity of either the Ukrainian elections, defending the integrity of the State Department, defending the integrity of the FBI, and making sure that the institutions that they worked for were ethical and defended. Not a single one of them said, we swore an oath to the Constitution. Jesus. And that's the thing we're here to defend. Wow. And that was a low priority for everybody. And part of the problem with the institutionalized nature of the US government is that we prioritize often the institutions over the Constitution. And institutions are important. And I understand it's a difficult, like, I'm not saying this is, oh, those people are bad, this is an evil thing. Like, it's difficult. You work for that institution. You want to have credibility. But the Constitution needs to be prioritized, I think, a little bit better within those agencies.
Thank you for that.
I got just 2 words. Fuck norms. The scariest press conference I ever saw was Merrick Garland spending half an hour talking about how norms were the most important thing that he was defending. I was like, no, dude, the rule of law. That's the thing that you need to defend, not your fucking norms. I don't care right now because the other side is not playing by those rules.
Yeah. Well, and
if we're playing by a different set of rules, then we're just giving them room to operate.
Right.
Yeah.
Speaking of them, and this will be my last question. What I want to see are whistleblowers from the other side at some point coming forward. Right.
Me too.
Mm-hmm.
Like for me, there's like 100 individuals that I know of that have spent their time attacking me for whatever reason. You know, what I want to see is some of these people like come forward, take advantage of the fact that, you know, they have information that other people don't, which is how the internal operations of these things work, and come forward, be a hero. Where are these people? It's very, they do a very good job at keeping all of this stuff quiet. And I'm wondering if you've had any success at finding people who are on the wrong side of these operations.
Yes and no. I mean, yes and no in the sense of we have sources that are, I would say, are in that middle area, right? That are in that area of don't know if they're necessarily fully victims, don't know if they're necessarily fully perpetrators, and generally don't fully understand. They not always honest. You know what I mean? Like we'll hear things where I'm just like, that's not true. Yes, but usually they're in a position where they're not in a place to come out.
Yeah.
Whether of the location that they're in, their financial situation, their family situation, and seems like they want to be helpful, but also don't really want to come to terms with the things that they've done or the people around them.
It's incredible.
Yeah. Wow. And so I think that a lot of people can convince themselves that they're not part of a thing because, you know, I don't wake up in the morning and, you know, swear an allegiance to Vladimir Putin and I have my ideas and I'm an independent thinker and So nobody wants to see themselves as such. So I think that you'll probably get some just because the money's going to run out. And when the money, but I think that they've been good enough about compartmentalizing information that it's going to be hard for one of these guys to be like, I have the big story, because you only have a teeny piece of the story, actually.
Well, for the record, if any of the people, you don't have to have the whole story. You just need to tell your story.
But I think what's already been happening and is more likely is I think a lot more people are going to reach out and say to us and to other news agencies, and I hope news agencies start picking up, like, I was the victim of this.
Yes.
That has to happen first. I think that there has to be a national conversation of like, this was done to me, before people start coming out and saying, yeah, I feel bad about that now.
Agreed. And that's why what you're doing is so important.
Important.
Thank you so much for coming on the show and for doing the work you do, man. It's fucking amazing. Everything you've done has been brilliant.
Yeah. High five. Do you want to have a last comment or question?
This is a rough one, but I'll take a yes or no on it.
Please.
Near as I can tell, what we're looking at is a global plot to overthrow liberal democracy that started with Putin, the Russian mob, Russian intelligence apparatus, Russian Orthodox Church, then expanded to include strongmen running or attempting to run authoritarian governments, oligarchs, current and former intelligence agents, all tied to organized crime, as well as religious zealots from, in no particular order, Turkey, UAE, Saudi Arabia, Serbia, Ukraine, Israel, India, Myanmar, Philippines, Mexico, Iran, United States, Italy, France, Germany, Austria, Bulgaria, China, Mali, Burkina Faso, Central African Republic, Sudan, and probably a few others I forgot about.
Oh, Russia.
Yes or no?
Yes.
Well, let's start. Yeah.
The only caveat I would have is the start point. That I think that for anything like this, that the start point, that I think that's probably, I think 2012.
It's not geographic. It's historic.
Yeah. I think that the start point is for Russia. Yes, I think 2012, but also earlier. Like, that's the thing is that's for me always the hardest thing is, when did this start? Because I don't know, John Birch Society, formation of fascism in 1920.
Listen, arguably 1946.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Like Jack Singlob started America's Future in 1946.
Yeah.
Or you could say it starts with Henry Ford.
Then you light a match with the pardoning of Nixon when it became okay to be a corrupt president. There's so much there.
But I think 2012 is a good. Russia's 2012 is about as good a place you can say that this started in a real way. The influence component of very consciously pushing this kind of thing out there. I would not argue 2012 is a start date for like the seriousness, the players specifically being brought in. That is when the fuckery really gets crazy.
Yeah, I mean, listen, Occupy was 2010, so
and the Russians did it to their own people in 2000. So, but I think we're gonna that last line you said, it was really the escalation of the fuckery. It was really in place. Oh my God, Jack, thank you so much for your time and your expertise and your amazing work. And please come back, because there's a million
I promised you a nugget.
Oh, yes. Our Easter egg.
I'm all for nuggies.
Okay. So I mentioned that when actually my business partner, Marley, when she spoke to Wes in 2017, I first heard a story. The first time within hearing the story where I was like, nope, this is bullshit, was because I thought it was completely unbelievable that a certain popular rapper would be hanging out with a bizarre right-wing network and talking about running for president.
Yeah. Okay. Beautiful. Thank you. That was really important.
Shit.
Yeah.
Seems like a really unbelievable story.
Yeah.
A rapper.
Yeah.
That's a good tease, brother.
That's
a good
our
tease.
Cliffhanger. Oh,
well done.
Man.
Well done.
Well, thanks for having me on, guys. Really appreciate it.
Thank you, Jack. You're the best, man. Thanks.
So glad to have him here. Wow. Yeah. He's phenomenal. His work's phenomenal.
Jack's work is consistently important.
Yeah.
And well executed. I mean,
Well,
Search for Q. I mean, Search for Q. That first season is
right.
the only documentary, other than mine, honestly, that got it right at all.
Well,
and then
also,
Marley did an awesome job with season 2. But
they're amazing.
American PsyOp is amazing.
The work is incredibly important, and I'm so glad you brought up active measures, because what was so important about what they did, again, in terms of framing things historically, they showed people in Eastern European countries, leaders who did not get elected as president because they were Hillaried before Hillary was even running for president. They were using techniques and doctoring video that resulted in presidents who were, more democratic or more NATO sympathetic, not getting elected. So they went back into the 2014s and into that period before, into Ukraine, and we saw everything from the catchphrases, from them, Manafort being behind the lock her up for Tymoshenko in Ukraine. I mean, it was just, it's vital work. So yeah, exciting stuff. Speaking of vital work, I think it's very important that we give our good friend John Sweeney, who I mentioned earlier, the last word here. Sweeney, in one of his war reports from Ukraine, is noting that what does he call them? He has a great word for him, kind of the Russian jackals, that's not the word he uses, of media are actually worried that the propagandists that do Putin's propaganda on television in Russia are actually worried that they may go to The Hague for war crimes because of the lies and the lies and the lies that they tell. So have a listen.
War Diary Day 280 of Vladimir Putin's war. It's a sunny day and still no Russian missiles. Maybe I was wrong about the weather being the critical factor. Grim as life is here in Kyiv and across Ukraine. Many people are doing that power for much of the day, and that means many people are doing without water, and the suffering is real and intense, but the spirit here is strong. However, on the Russian side, they've got problems too. So why haven't they hit the place, Kyiv, with more missiles? Well, it may well be that they're actually running out of cruise missiles, or enough of them to smack the city as hard as they'd like, as often as they'd like. And there's some evidence of that. Number two, there's an opinion poll which has been leaked to the anti-Kremlin Russian website. It's based abroad, obviously, Medusa. And Medusa's reporting says that now only 25% of Russians support the war. By the way, because Russia is effectively a dictatorship, that number doesn't really matter until there is a critical mass against Vladimir Putin, and there's no sign of that for the moment. A third factor, which is actually really quite exciting, is the ghastly crew of Kremlin patsy media who go on Russian television. And remember, nearly all Russians get their main news from Russian TV, which is incredibly tightly controlled by the Kremlin. They're starting to get worried. They're even talking about going to The Hague. They're worried about going to The Hague. By the way, every single one of these people on these shows, they have been part of the big lie. They have told lie after lie after lie about Russian war crimes, and so all of them should end up in The Hague. Ha ha ha. I will go there and report their trials. So, yes, life is tough here, but the war for Russia is not going well either. Love from Kyiv, and a simple message for Vladimir Putin. Vladimir Putin, do fuck off.